Hello, dear listener. I'm beaming in at the top of the episode to let you know that the doors to Ma, which is my red hot devotional membership that I facilitate, the doors are open this week. And inside of Ma, we're about to spend 4 weeks of ceremony call, group mentorship, learning to help mystical lovers like you create more intimate and cosmic relationships. That is, we're here to open the portal of devotion in your romantic life. Intimate relationships and partnerships are one of the main story arcs of our lives, regardless of the shape they take over time. They bring so much desire, pain, healing, underworlds, beauty, frustration. There's a way that we encounter ourselves inside of intimate partnership in a way that we don't anywhere else in life. And how we show up to these is one of the most sincere, alchemical, and vulnerable world-building things that we do. And I see so many people regularly stuck at crossroads that show up as a fight or an argument that happens over and over again. And I myself have walked through those seasons, and usually those are really profound invitations for us to become and unearth ourselves, become more radiant, become more in love if we can only walk across that threshold in a more devoted way. The sacred is the mundane, the sexual is the spiritual, the cosmic is the intimate, and the relational is the field. And in this container, we honor your desire as innocent and beautiful, while also sharing portals and practices to open you up to the power that you have to heal and deepen your relationships with equal parts magic and embodiment, practical application, archetypal wisdom, because devoted partnership is more than commitment. It's about creating an alchemical vessel for your greatest transformation, and that of your partner and that of you together. There is a radical simplicity of what depth and devotion can invite you into. And for most relationships, most of the time, it only takes one person to heal the relationship. And it can begin with you. So I hope you'll join me inside of Ma for Soul Match, where we'll move beyond the field of transaction, which is where most people get stuck in relationship, transacting, owing and indebtedness, obedience and punishment. And instead, we can move into the field of forgiveness and love and devotion, freely giving, freely receiving, freely seeing, and taking responsibility for our experience, which is the royal way that can open up all things. The doors close on September 13th, which is the end of this week, and you can sign up to learn more at mgallardice.com, mgallerdice.com, or by joining the waitlist for Ma at the link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. My name is Grace, and you're listening to the Homebody Podcast. I love having conversations with friends, especially on the podcast, because I find that there's a level of background knowing and intimacy that arises from that connection in a way that can be hard to get to if it's strictly professional.
Yeah. But at the same time, sometimes when you're friends, you're also doing, I don't want to say a performance of being professional, but it's like when you're used to seeing someone in their sweats and underwear, and then and then they put on an outfit to go to a fancy wedding.
You're like,
And
oh my God.
wow, we look good. We look different.
Like, oh, I'm so like proud to be friends with you. I feel the same
Yeah.
way about my husband. Like when we go out and do something really fancy, it's like, oh,
Yes.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And the kind of something happens when you put on a pair of shoes, like a
Hmm.
real pair of shoes, like an adult pair of shoes, both for men and women. And it's like, look at you in your shoes. Look at us in our shoes.
We're wearing metaphorical shoes today. For those of you listening, I invited Portia onto the podcast in a very vulnerable ask because I feel like often I have a hard time perceiving my work from the outside in a way that translates well to people who are listening. So I
Mm.
think sometimes it can create a familiarity with my ideas and perceptions of things, but it can create less familiarity with the things that I actually do or the offerings that my work is structured around. And you are so eloquent. You have such a great way of very quickly grasping and understanding sort of the full spectrum of what's going on in a particular space with a particular situation. And I think there's an incisiveness that the two of us have in common that I really enjoy. And you bring all of these skills really eloquently and powerfully to bear in your work, both as an artist and a writer, and also with your magical potions of flower essences. And I will say from the beginning that I've never really cared about flower essences before. I've heard lots of people talk about them, and I've never felt, oh, that's a medicine that I need. I've never felt a relationship to them or a magnetism towards them. But something about how you relate to flower essences and how you talk about them made me instantly feel like I absolutely need whatever it is that you're making, and I will pay you whatever you want. And the gift of a
Well,
custom blend, too, especially a custom intuitive blend like you've made for me a few times, has just been the most powerful, beautiful gift. So,
it's an honor and a pleasure always to work with the flower essences and also to share them with anyone, but especially with friends.
mhm,
I think there's a part of me that sometimes it's most of the time it's useful, sometimes it isn't, likes to summarize things, is looking to locate the essence of what's going on. And I won't go down a long tangent on what that means when working with flower essences, but it's something that I've people have commented on a lot over the years. And sometimes in my own work, I actually over summarize things. I don't say enough. Um,
mhm.
but that's another story.
Yeah, I think that's something that I tend to do as well. I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to find the gold nugget. And then I come up and I say, here's the gold nugget. But because I haven't necessarily taken people on the whole journey of the multi year scuba dive it took to go get the gold nugget at the bottom of the ocean, it can feel like it's hard for them to perceive the relationship of it to them or to me. And I'm like, look, I succinctly saved you years of work. Here's the gold nugget. And that's not
Mhm.
how it's
Mhm.
received. But I think there's a way with presence. And I find, especially with like in person things and understanding, that can be really palpably felt. And I think
Yeah,
also, as you're talking about with the essences too, like that distillation is incredibly valuable in its
yeah,
simplicity.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that I was looking for words to describe what you do. And I think on one level, there are no words, but we do need some words. And I also think that the word teacher has, for a lot of us, a lot of baggage.
Mhm,
And unfortunately, because of the way mainstream Western education is organized, teaching has this connotation of I tell you facts and
mhm,
you either remember them or you relate to them intellectually and conceptually. And that's only one level of being a teacher, and maybe not the most important one.
mhm.
Do you ever introduce yourself as a teacher? And how do you feel when you do?
I think I do a lot of teaching, and I think I'm quite a good teacher. I think part of the reason that is, and I think in a way that may make me a little unique than some other people who you'd say are teaching online, is that the bulk of my education and teaching is with embodiment work and in-person work. So the way that I learned and understood how to sequence things, introduce things, build on things, when to keep going, when to pull back, when to modify, all of that happened with actual physical bodies and in group settings and private settings and various levels of intimacy. And I think that has served me really well in moving towards the online space because I can bring that intelligence to things, even if I'm not necessarily teaching something embodiment oriented.
Mm.
And I think what you're saying is really true about the way that we tend to relate to teachers, especially in our weird values. Weird is like the acronym. And I was talking about this with my husband recently because he absolutely hated school and, didn't go to college. I did well in school and went to college, but I was absolutely miserable and depressed the whole time. Is like that model that you're describing only values one kind of intelligence, and it only supports one layer of understanding. And I think, we have the opposite in a lot of spiritual circles where we have this hierarchical pedestalizing of a guru or a priest, right? Like in patriarchal, empirical traditions, it's like this person has some sort of special, exclusive access to what is divine, to what is spirit. And you have to be good little children and tithe and do all of your things in order to get that blessing. Transferring all of our power to someone else for the hopes of some kind of enlightenment or salvation. Hopefully that's over. But I think it's only over if people stop doing it. But I do think that there are people, we could call them the cosmic servants, the bodhisattvas. I'm definitely not saying that I'm one of those. But I'm thinking of the Jesuses, the Mary Magdalenes, the Yoganandas. There's a level of presence and understanding and union that they have mastered
Mm.
that we could be advised to listen to. And I think there's a way that we could be like, they are teaching us. And there's a way we can do that in a way that we're like, oh, that's because this is some kind of special person, which has definitely happened, especially with like conventional Christianity in the West.
Mm.
Or we could make it about this person is demonstrating a level of presence and understanding and embodiment that I too can have access to. I too can be. It's not something separate from me. And I
Right.
guess that's a long way around to say, like, yes, I think I am a teacher, a good teacher.
Yeah.
I think that's a capital T situation? I don't necessarily think that. But am I devoted to embodying a level of presence and understanding as best as I can for the betterment of my life in the world? Yes, because I don't think that those are separate things.
Right. I mean, I think part of the reason that I started with that question is because I was listening to a couple of episodes of your podcast, and I think that you are teaching in this
Mhm.
space. I think that
Mm.
you are sharing more than just information. I think that it's I hear your journey and I hear your devotion, and also that you have processed. You're not sharing a notion that just tickled you yesterday. You're sharing something where you were at least a couple of cycles through of contemplation, application, observation, reflection. That's You can feel how rich it is from my point of view. And I think that that speaks to the kind of teacher that you are in person. And at the same time, in the world, as many of us experience it, it can be easy to just listen to the podcast, take on the concepts, engage intellectually, because that's how we've all been trained via school, and not click that button and say,
Mm-hmm.
I want to actually be in conversation with this woman. I want to ask her questions. I want her to, and I think it's one thing to be taught a different perspective on something, and then it's another thing to really allow that whole perspective, to be in the presence of that perspective, and to be held in the attention of someone who is living in a certain way. That is a different kind of teaching. It's a different kind of education, maybe.
Our presence is really our gift, the thing that moves the needle inside and outside of us. It's not necessarily, and when our words and our actions match up with that presence, our words and actions become more powerful because they're all coherent. But the presence is the primary thing. And it's the thing that I think is the most important. And especially from this alchemical feminine perspective, where it's the direction is incarnational, the direction is embodiment, the direction is like on the planet here now,
Mm,
rather than fostering up some other perfect version of you in spirit when we can finally escape the hellscape of matter.
right.
It's our presence that is the redemptive quality that we bring to life, I think, if we're going to call it that. The thing that can change anything is our presence. And I think that's really hard to communicate and to illustrate based on how, as you pointed out, we relate to knowledge and learning in the West.
Exactly.
For instance, if you listen to Ram Dass and he talks about Neem Karoli Baba, it's really like you looked into someone's eyes and he just experienced the vast amount of love and acceptance, and his life was instantly different. It wasn't because he was like, here's the 5 steps you need to know to become an enlightened human. Like, that wasn't really it. And he
Right.
basically showed and gave the flame of love he had inside him shining through his eyes, gave him some clues to his destiny, and sent him on his way to go figure it out.
Mm.
And that's just something that we don't really have a lot of frameworks for in the West, where we want the 5 steps, we want it laid out. And I think it can be really hard, or in my experience, to communicate, at least through the internet, how different just listening to something and extracting your bullet points can be, and then actually being in presence can be. And I think it's easier to translate in person. If
Yeah.
someone comes for like an in-person session or like meets me in person, that's something that's a little easier to translate because we're both grounded and experiencing one another's presence. But I wonder about if it's true for you. Like, some feedback I get often is, I can feel what you're saying is true. I can feel the energy that you're saying. Like, they can feel it. And that is a little clue to me that, oh, something's getting married inside of me. Like, the words and the presence are starting to really cohere and they can sense it, not just hear my words,
Yeah.
which is something I love that feedback. I wonder if that's something that you notice in yourself or in other spaces or in other kinds of work, how you've noticed difficulty bridging that gap, or people bridging that gap really well.
I'm a holistic practitioner and I'm also a filmmaker, and I have experience teaching inside the university system, teaching people how to turn their ideas into films. I love teaching in all sorts of ways, and I especially love teaching when we're going to do something practical. I
Mhm.
don't know if I love teaching theory. I haven't ever really done it.
I think something that you said already stands out to me, where, a holistic practitioner, and I think someone who is approaching whatever it is they do from a holistic perspective and a holistic space is automatically doing some hybridization and doing a lot of connecting to a lot of different things. And I think that can also make being obvious and succinct rather difficult, or difficult for me. There's a way that it's easy to be like, I'm a yoga teacher. Makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense than, bringing experience as a yoga teacher, a Pilates teacher, a dance artist, an energy worker, all of that together. People are like, the hologram is so, how do all these
Yeah.
things talk to each other? And for you, bridging like film and flower essences and academia, like all these things that you're bringing to the table. My experience is it takes more time and foundation laying to really communicate the intricacy and the net of support that all of those
Mm.
different things can provide.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I know from experience, both in the more formal teaching and then in session as a practitioner, is that for me, part of the benefit, and we don't have to be in the same room, but we have to be paying attention to each other.
Mhm.
Part of the benefit of that is that I know when something is landing for the student or the client. I
Mhm.
can either feel it or I can see it in their eyes. It's
Mhm.
the same as a director when you give an actor a note. You know when you said something that is provoking them and is going to yield a different performance. And
Mhm.
it's in some ways it's subtle, but I think the more you pay attention to it, it's really fucking obvious. And that's when you can start to customize your delivery and use a pause if a pause is needed, or say more if more is needed, or clarify if that's what's useful. And it would be sweet. It would be sweet if we were moving into a different way of relating to teachers or just adults, and to be fair, very, very small people can be very wise and can teach you too. Um, and it's trying to free the learning and growth experience from metrics and performance and punishment. I perceive you to be a teacher and a practitioner of immense skill and with a very rich background. And I feel that your podcast is very rich, but I also feel like the experience of being in your presence, as you were just saying, is then you can be in conversation, you can be in dialogue, and that's a really rich place to be.
Yeah, it becomes an alchemical space
Exactly.
as opposed to an intellectual space.
Yeah, it has the potential to become truly alchemical. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think something that was coming up for me too is I think it can be easy to underestimate the amount of transformation that's available to us.
Mm.
The ways that we can really experience life so differently. I think people tend to underestimate what's really available there. And or there can be fear of what that transformation will ask of us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that is also something that might be unconscious that can keep people out of really potent containers. Was talking about this with a friend who shares an anointing practice that I do. And she was talking about how there were a few people that had like booked the session, but they always like found a way to not come.
Mm. Mm.
And we were discussing how like it's a really potent practice. It's very powerful healing work. And there's just a way that not everyone's ready for that. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And that's
Yeah.
totally fine and totally beautiful. And I think sometimes, especially when your work is also healing work in some way, you're approaching your work
Mm.
from the perspective of a healer. For instance, like when I'm teaching, I'm doing it from an approach as a healer. Like I'm not just teaching because like I'm so smart, I have things to share. Like I might have something totally different that I think in 10 years because I will keep changing, but it's shared from a place of like healing invitation. And I think with people who are healing practitioners, it can be really helpful to remember that like not everyone is necessarily ready for what that kind of will ask of them necessarily. And
Yeah.
there may be some unconscious opting out. And that's also totally fine and beautiful. And everyone has their own time. But I think that can
Yeah.
be really helpful to remember as a practitioner.
Yeah. I recognize that flower essences are they're a liquid that you ingest and you take a very small dose. And I've seen people almost within the same minute poo poo them as something that couldn't possibly be effective and be scared of them.
Mm.
And I'm fascinated by that because if you really think it's such a trifle, if you really think it's not consequential, you'd just do it, wouldn't you? I can feel in their rejection of it that exactly as you said, there's an invitation for potentially profound transformation. And today might not be the day. This week might
Yeah.
not be the week. Some people receive a blend and need to look at it for a little while. It needs to be in their
Mhm.
house for a little while. And I really respect that. That's fine. I don't think I set the timeline. And it again, and just as you said, if it's not for you or not right now, no probs. I have no desire to rush anyone into it. But yeah, would you say if you had to describe yourself, what would you say you were a healing practitioner? Would you say you were a spiritual? There's so many words are kind of relevant.
That's true. I think the word that's really at the heart of what I do is priestess work. Like it's
Mm,
like basically all the things are built around like full spectrum priestess mode. Death work is a part of that.
mhm,
The erotic is a part of that. The
mhm,
oracular is a part of that. Teaching is a part of that. If you were to go into a temple, you would expect those things to be there. There's a way that, heal it like herbs and things like that,
mhm,
flowers, making essences. Those things are not things that I'm good at. I would say I'm definitely more on the ceremonial vibe queen
mm.
end of the spectrum. Healing work is essentially facilitating space in which people can meet the part of them that knows, can touch the part of them that's already whole. And that's kind of all I'm ever trying to do. Whether I'm making a podcast episode or I'm rubbing oil all over someone's body and singing over them, or whether I'm doing a death ritual for them, or I'm, doing a ceremony in Ma, that's all I'm trying to do. There's a part of you that already knows, there's a part of you that's already whole. And the more you touch that part of you and bridge it, the more whole and healed you will become.
Right,
Yeah. Which,
right.
I am not the integral ingredient to that. You are. But in service to you, one can hold space for that and create transformational space for that, which is an art and a skill and something that is learned.
I mean, it makes sense to me what you say about priestess being the the word that encompasses all the things that you do. I also know that as at the time of recording, a lot of people don't have an accurate reference point for priestess and certainly have a lot of baggage around priest. For some reason, I was getting the court jester. Now, there
Mm,
was a time when people had a fundamental understanding of what that person did, and that person probably has evolved to become the stand-up comedian. It's a vital and not easy path that we all need, and from it, lots of things can, like, branch out, and you can squash it into a cartoon, the court jester in their colorful outfit, but in reality, if there was if there was a king who had way too much power and was in a terrible mood and 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 the crops had failed and the food didn't taste good and that man could exploit his power to very, very violent ends. The court jester can do something really fundamentally important by telling the right joke at the right time. You know, heads may not roll because of that. And so I just think it's like an accordion. There's the illustration on the tarot card, and then there's the all of the energy that exists behind it. And like most things, it has to be experienced, basically. You have to touch into it, and a person has to bring their presence to it to really know what it's going to be like. And I see the same thing with flower essences. I know what the essences can do, but it never fails to be really beautiful and surprising in a really special way when someone tells me how they're experiencing them, because it has to be the essences in their system. It's all just speculation up until that point to some degree.
I love that you brought in the court jester. That's such a perfect, yeah, I think it's such a powerful and necessary archetypal role. And I think maybe it was you, and we were talking about stand-up comedians as healers. The
Yeah.
way that, like, there's this, like, oracular soothsaying function that is, I don't even think it's masked, but that's, like, woven into humor and the riddle and the joke. And the riddle is such a part of, like, the oracular. It's such a big, powerful way. And you're totally right. This person can say something to the king that no one else can because it's cloaked as entertainment or joke.
Yeah. Yeah. And the relief that we feel when we hear someone make a joke,
Mhm.
especially if it's one that we feel is not allowed,
Mhm.
there's suddenly a relationship to all sorts of, I think, emotional release can occur through the laughter that is the consequence of the great stand up. And I also think that stand up comedians in particular, but comedians in general, any performance that they're giving, have to really fucking commit. They have to be fully committed. And I think that that's exactly the same for, any holistic work, but certainly when we're talking about priestess level. Like
Yeah,
it's like commitment. Your whole life is committed to it, right?
it's devotion. Yeah. In the Gene Keys, devotion is the city of commitment,
Mm.
which I really love. And he also separates that from veneration. And veneration has a root word in the word Venus or Venusian. So it has this inherently feminine correspondence associated with it. And the story that he tells with veneration is this story about a man who just goes out planting trees. And he just goes out and he plants trees, and the forest grows up and it grows high and it grows tall, and there's woodland creatures everywhere. And then there's a war and the trees get burned. And then he just goes out planting trees. And then someone wants to come in, and it doesn't matter what's going on around. The person goes out planting trees, period. End of story. And I think that's a really essential and, like, fundamental part of what I would consider to be a priestess role. And when we're showing up if you're facilitating ceremony or transformational space or ritual, there's always like the only thing that's absolutely known. You can make all the plans that you want, but the only thing that's absolutely known is you're just showing up completely aware that whatever you're channeling in and bringing into the room can just fuck up all your plans and make you look ridiculous in service to the whole. And you're totally fine with that. It is this commitment to being the bridge and being a doorway and being a portal and being a presence holder.
It's the same for comics, right? They don't know if it's going to land. There's no single comedian who is going to tell a joke that the whole world thinks is funny. Everyone can find a room where it's crickets, even if they can play a whole stadium of people who love them. And I love that. Just going to go out and plant the trees again because that's what I'm here to
That's
do.
what I'm here to do. End of story. I think that's great. What you're hinting at the comedy role is also gets to this really core wound or fear. It can show up in a lot of like misunderstanding. Like there's so many people who don't use their voice, who don't connect in like a reason I never said, like 3 years ago, I would not have said the word priestess out loud. It was roaring inside of me, but it wasn't a way that I would say it out loud because I had a deep fear of being misunderstood.
Right.
And I think there's a way all of us want to land on the cushion of understanding. But then there's also a way when we're living completely bridged to the part of us who knows and is connected to like the capital H who we are, that becomes less important. The devotion becomes the most important thing.
I love that.
And that's something that keeps being initiated into deeper and deeper layers of truth for me.
The cushion of understanding is a great phrase.
Thank you.
I wanted to resist like linear time-based questions like how long have you been doing this, because it's like since you were born in some way, you know. But I did wonder if it would be, you know, or if you think it's a relevant and useful question to respond to. Were there and the movie maker in me is here, like, were there inciting incidents? You know, have there been any
So many.
specific, yeah. And, or are there any that you feel are particularly relevant to speak to now, in specifically in relationship to what you currently offer
Mm,
and what
I
is
think
available for people?
I think a really big shift happened in both the level of embodiment and tone in my work in the past 3 years because Mary Magdalene came into it. And at first that was a very like private and personal experience. But as I kept following the breadcrumbs that were like getting fed in the ethers, it led me to saying yes to a multi-year initiation ordination path to like become a priestess, like to really be like these are teachers, these are skills that I'm learning with other people, these are like rooms that I'm getting put into,
Mm,
not only be transformed by their presence and the presence of the container, but also like skills to learn. Like the anointing practice, for instance, is like a skill that like I practice and I go to retreats to learn. And, you know, from really beautiful women who've been practicing it for a very long time. And
mm,
I think the thing that's consistently happening as that keeps happening and I keep deepening into and rooting into that role or that practice, the more I notice that it keeps threading back farther and back into my timeline to things where I realize like, oh, I know how to do this.
yeah.
For instance, the first time I was in a room where we were anointing people as a group, which is an amazing field to be in, like that's a beautiful field to be in with like just that many people in healing mode and receiving mode and giving mode. Like the field becomes very powerful and very beautiful. But one thing I grew up in a very conservatively valued, but also very kind of wild evangelical, conventional Christian background. And one of the things I remember about being a kid in those, like, I was exposed to the practice of like laying your hands on people and asking the divine to heal them and seeing some very miraculous things and
Mm,
also being a part of some of those. And so it's really funny how I noticed that there's a way that the deeper I get into this role, the more it's calling back to like very little experiences of me that I had early in my life where I can see like, I already did that. I know how to do that. So that's a really beautiful and deeply healing dynamic that I've been in for the past 3 years in particular. And I also think it's just led me so deeply into the study and devotion of that red thread of the ways that what we call the goddess and the traditions devoted to her and the roles devoted to her have looked like across history and what they're here to do now. And back in November, I don't remember if there was a particular date on the calendar, but I was just in a really deep ceremonial experience privately by myself. And I had a really powerful oracular moment that came in with what to me felt like a very like boom of a message. And that initiated me so hard, where it was basically like, I mean, I was sick for a couple of weeks. I couldn't breathe all the way. And I was having wild dreams that I won't go into. But as I started to decipher them, what became clear was like, this message is not something for you to sneak around to your best friends. Like, you have to say this. And it initiated me so hard into that understanding that, like, if you care more about being liked and understood than you do about saying what it is you're here to say and be who it is you're here to be, then you can't do it. And that was really big for me. But linear wise, going back even farther, the bulk of my 20s after I left church. I rejected like everything that I had grown up with, super hardcore. I was in a lot of pain, a lot of anger. I spent most of the decade of my 20s making art and dance and writing grants and trying to make money and teaching Pilates and then learning to teach yoga and then taking this meditation certification and then getting initiated into this other meditation practice. And it's kind of a constant thing for me. I guess it would feel like seeking, except it feels like, oh, by the time I need this tool, look, here it is already in my backpack. And so I would say that the priestess work specifically, calling it as that, I've been investing and engaging in officially for the past 3 years. But my study of ceremony and ceremonial magic and healing tools goes back probably more like 10. And then if we go to teaching, it goes back more like 20.
Yeah.
So, and then this fresh, like hot red tone of my work has been more like, wow, this is really an overlay, has been probably something in the past year that's really landed.
I love that. I feel like it's like a cross section of like geographical layers. No, not geographical. You know, when I have an illustration of this, like the different levels of rock and how old it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like
There's like the strata.
that's the cake. That's the layer cake that your potential clients are moving into, or your current clients are working with.
There's a way that I used to feel really insecure about all the different things and the fact that there were so many different things.
Mm,
And now I feel like there's a really unique and beautiful synthesis here that I am absolutely like delighted and excited to have. Like the fact that it can be like, oh, are we painting a wall or are we picking out pillows? Are we redoing the foundation or are we redoing the roof? There's a way now that it feels like I have this full backpack of so many tools and ways to be with people that just feels for me so abundant and lovely when I'm in space with people.
yeah,
The
yeah,
primary one of which is the practice of just listening to the moment.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I relate to the experience of having done a lot of things, and that there's a moment where that can be perceived as being messy or erratic, or at best unconventional. But I think the thing is just as you said, it's your ability to allow it to synthesize
Mm-hmm.
that means it's all in the backpack,
Mm-hmm. That's
you
true.
know, and that you're not gonna reach for the wrong tool at the wrong moment, and you're not gonna deliver a barrage of wildly contradictory concepts to someone.
I think that's where the teacher comes in
Yeah,
because the teacher is like, what's needed now in this
yeah,
moment? And what do they need to know that serves the picture I'm trying to paint or the space I'm trying to hold? Or, it's different than the way I would approach choreography, where in a way where I'm not necessarily thinking about the audience and how digestible it is for them. It's more like this is what the work wants and we're doing it. But when you're teaching, you are thinking of the quote audience or the students. You're like, I want it to be true to the work, but I also want them to be able to eat the meal. And I think that's where the skillfulness of teaching comes in, I think, with sequencing, with
right.
the size of the chunk, with what can they hear today? What's the capacity? What's here for the moment? And sometimes that means in the moment, I'm like, I had this planned and this isn't it. We're going to do this instead.
Right.
And when I think about myself, is when I'm in receiving mode or when I'm in the presence of people who are teachers for me, or even if I'm in the space of healers or, even doctors, I don't want anyone touching me or looking at me if they can't just like sense it out. Honestly,
Mm.
if someone can't just look at my tongue and be like, "Isn't it this, 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 and this?" I'm like, "Absolutely. Yes, it is. You may proceed." Like at this point, like I'm not really interested in anyone interfacing with my field or my body if they don't have that antenna going on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And I
I don't
think
care
that
how many degrees that you have.
right, right. Because sometimes and often, unfortunately, it's the degree talking,
Mhm.
not and I think it's that call it a teacher, call it a practitioner, call it whatever you want. It's someone who's paying attention
Mhm.
and updating in real time and can handle that. And I was having an exchange with someone online a little while ago on the subject of filmmaking, and I didn't mean to split hairs, but we came down to this. We're having a back and forth about flexibility versus agility.
Mm.
As a director, I'm not being flexible about the story. We're not going to rewrite this scene on the day. The essence of the scene is what it is and must be captured. I do intend to be agile about how I go about negotiating just with the real material world constraints of filmmaking.
Mhm.
And so it's maybe it's not about the definitions of the word. It's just that we're not moving the goalpost,
Mhm.
but there is an ability to shift and stretch or retreat, to adjust accordingly, whether it's the teacher talking to the student who's overwhelmed. It's like, don't give them more concepts if they're overwhelmed. If it's the director on location and, there's no windows, like, why are we at the hit, whatever, there's a responsiveness, a real time responsiveness. And I think that if you ticked boxes and sort of done the status quo thing and done what was expected and there's a so first you do this and then you do that and then you do a PhD and then you can do this. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to suggest that that's not in alignment for some people. There are some people that's really correct and they do very, very valuable work along those channels and they move along that pathway. But when you have this experience where you haven't done that, that didn't work for you, it did not unfold in that way, it felt like a fucking lie and it didn't serve you,
Mhm.
and then you forge your own pathway, and there are moments where you think, "This isn't a path. This is not this is a fractured gobbledygook of things." And I think that there's something about maturation, and there's also something about coming into contact with what is truly, your for me, it was the flower essences are the modality I work with. They are a language I understand. I understood them with ease. It requires my concentration, but it is not challenging for me to hold this information. It's natural to me. And that sort of, it makes everything else coherent somehow. There's a cohesive quality to it. And then you're in synthesis. Then now it's a lot of tools in a backpack and not a plastic bag with holes and
Totally.
too much stuff in it.
I love that you said coherence. That's a word that I just keep coming back to where it's like, I think what we experience as healing is coherence. I think what we
Mm,
experience as being powerful, as power, is coherence. I think what we experience, maybe even as love, is coherence. And it's not something that can be faked.
right, right.
There's a way that your path, because you've walked it and had all the moments where you're like, is this even a path? And, like the fact that you went through all of those moments where it was nighttime in the dark in the jungle with like a fork makes it something that is like deeply coherent in you and no one can take from you. And Like you absolutely all the way own it because you went through all of the work to make it coherent in you.
Exactly, which is it's kind of a milestone, I guess, or maybe it's like a level, like a personal level. It's a sweet experience. And I think it's an achievement. Again,
It's a reward. It feels very rewarding.
yeah, it feels rewarding. It feels rewarding and nourishing and generative to some degree really validate yourself for yourself on your own terms.
Yeah. I think it's harder to do than to be having someone else validate you and say, you're this. Here's the piece of paper that qualifies you with blah, blah, blah association of whatever, whatever. And I don't think that they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I love a certification. I'm always in like 5 at one time. But I think that by itself is flimsy and not going to do anything, which tends to be, and probably into a way that's not useful or helpful. I just like don't lean into the CV because I almost like when I'm working with someone, I rarely care what their CV is. I could just tell I'm like, no, I think you have it. You've got it. You really ate the whole thing and digested it, and now it lives in you. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately for a lot of people, the path of ticking the boxes and getting the certificate, it can be really challenging. Like it's not to poo-poo it. If you've made it through those grad programs and that PhD, that's a huge,
Go you.
absolutely. And at the same time, it is possible to do that because you're being driven by essentially programs that are telling you to outsource your validation.
Hmm.
And that can feel hollow.
Yeah, it can be sourced from like this. I'm doing the right thing. Like there's a way,
Mm,
especially to, I don't know if this is true in the UK, but it can happen. It's definitely here in the US where if you do X, Y, and Z and you go to this school, you're guaranteeing your future. You're guaranteeing your certainty. You're guaranteeing security. And there's a way that we're doing it in this transactional mode where I'm doing, I'm pursuing the checking the right next box because I think that's controlling the narrative and guaranteeing the next thing. And I think that transaction mode is something that can totally work. And I think also it's not fulfilling and it's not inherently powerful.
yeah.
It very much roots down into that, just some of that way that we've been programmed to say that being spiritual is about being a good person
Mm,
or about being very good. And if we just do all the good things and we do all the right things and we check all the right boxes, then only good things will happen to us. And like that whole nonsense.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think that certainty is real. So
I don't
it
either,
never,
but
it,
most of our culture is built around it,
I
or
know,
the promise of it, or
the fake security of it, the fake safeness.
the fake
It's
safeness.
safeness. Yeah.
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 And that makes sense, right? Because our ego wants at all costs not to die. And there's a way that and you get into spiritual work where they're like, no, that's the first thing that must happen. Like you will get none of these
Mm,
other things if you don't get really good at that.
absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
that's a skill.
But also that's where the aliveness comes in. The aliveness
Hmm.
comes in when you confront the fact that life is dangerous
Hmm.
and nature is violent. And that's not to say that you don't experience deep peace, but it's an avoidance of the innate danger of being incarnate, basically, I think. And you do have to let the ego grapple with that.
I wanted to touch on something that you said earlier too about this way that if we're going to like deepen our experience of ourselves as pure spiritual beings, then ego death is a part of that. And we live in a wild, dangerous world where,
Mhm.
on like a blue dot in the middle of space that could just drop out at any, there's like death is imminent at any time. And that's just how life works. And at the same time, that can be true. And we can also like honor our body coming into coherent time and being like, right now, there are no bears chasing you. Right now, there
Right,
is no jaguar at your throat. Right.
right.
And like there's a way to like honor what the body needs in support of like all the goals without putting this label of like, and everything's going to be okay forever and only things that you think are nice will happen to you. be good, check all your boxes. So I just wanted to say that, because I think honoring the body and what the body needs is really important. And I think that we were talking about the ocean as mother. And I think something that's alchemically true is what's really, when we get to the gold of something, which is the goal of alchemy, is that we have sufficiently unified opposites within ourselves to where I am fierce and I'm funny. I'm alive and I am dead at the same time. I am, when we think about Kali Ma, for instance, she's the creator and the destroyer.
Right.
And I think that's really where mastery is. And that's really the thing. It's not to be so good that no one would ever think I'm bad. It's so like I am good and I am bad. I am neither good and I'm not bad. I'm the creator and the destroyer. And I think there's a way what you're talking about, often a picture that can come up around mothering and motherhood is this like self-effacing, submissive, always only sacrificial person who lives for her children and cooking, and that's all.
Yeah.
And that's quite the opposite of my experience of the quote, great mother.
Right.
Which is why I think often it's I think there is a sweet, kind, comforting voice that any infant would love to listen to, but that's not usually the voice that I get and I hear booming through my system. It is the face of birth and it's the face of death together. The same, and in the Kabbalistic tree of life, the sphere of Binah is the sphere of understanding, and it's the sphere of the alchemical feminine. But it's at the top of the pillar of severity, not the pillar of mercy.
Right.
And I think that's really a really potent paradox in there about like how severe it is to be in this process, how much it asks of you to be in this process. And I think when we were talking about the ocean is delightful. Everyone around the world crowds at the beach, loves it, enjoys it, plays in the water, goes boogie boarding and surfing. There's whales, which I'm obsessed with. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're absolutely dead and no one's going to notice.
Right.
And those are both true. And I think those are both the mother. And I think that's important to remember because I think people are often judging themselves based on a gradient that isn't there. They're like, well, I did all of this care work forever and ever and ever, and then I feel guilty about the time I had to step away. And I'm like, the tide comes in and the tide goes out. It's not the ocean when the tide's going out, still is, still there, still the source of all life on earth. It just, the tide's up and the tide's not up. And I think there's something about layering in that level of severity and movement and change and power mixed with pleasure, mixed with flow. That's like very much a part of the wisdom of what that is.
Yeah. And I feel that in you, and I feel it in the way you speak about your work. And I think that who's we? We as a world, as a people, a lot of us had the good fortune and good luck to be in the presence of powerful women. A lot of us know powerful mothers, aunts, grandmothers, whoever, your parents' friends, your parents' mothers. Possibly those experiences have been either few and far between, or in the experience of just being alive and managing everything that means. When we have been in the presence of powerful women, it's very rare that they can be really in their fullness, or certainly in the past. So some parts of them had to be released or silenced for them to be in their power. Maybe just because they were fucking exhausted because they were a single parent. There's that. And I don't think I can put a really tidy bow on it, but my sense is that part of what you're offering in your work and part of what I offer in my work in different ways, and what is profoundly beneficial to everyone, regardless of gender or age, is electing, choosing to come into the presence of a woman who feels full and who is engaging kind of something full spectrum, whatever the field may be. You can insert the specifics of what you're interested in or what you're drawn to, and that something is being profoundly rebalanced by a lot of people's work at this moment.
Yeah. Something I've been writing about lately, and I'm not really sure where I'm going to put it, is like pussy is a mystery school.
Mm.
And like it matters that in the West and those who grew up sort of under the guise of like empire Christianity, quote, Christianity, Yogananda calls it churchianity, which I kind of like, but that God was the father, God was he, God was this like sort of angry tribal situation. And there was no she, there was no mother there. And I think that has a massive toll in ways that we don't have time to go into here on how we relate to what is powerful and what is holy and what is beautiful and what we consider vital and what we consider the capital M mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
A
I
lot
think the
was.
things that make mother turn on and how that looks is different than how father turns on and how that looks. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I'm saying both of the poles are necessary for any synthesis in any genre to happen. And we spent a lot of years without one of those really powerful ones. And I think that's why we're experiencing this kind of surge or resurgence of like, wait a second, aren't like blood mysteries a thing? Like, aren't like womb mysteries a thing? Like, and all these, yeah. If you've been in the presence of like a really intact, powerful woman having an orgasm, you're like, that shit's powerful. You can like
Right.
feel the like, whoa, like there's something in that that's like massively powerful, like not just on a physical level. Like there's some spiritual like that like happens.
Yeah.
And it's things like that. That's just a very practical example.
Yeah.
But that's a way that all of the embodiment codes and spirit codes that come through that system and those mysteries have been gone. And they're really deeply important and they're very powerful and they're very different from a lot of the patterning around morality and obedience that we were raised with. I think women in particular received, at least of like my generation and older, the message either overtly or covertly that it's about like making everyone else feel good so that eventually you will feel good. But I think there's something that's really unfurling for me in like studies of the erotic and biology and, very old sex mysteries that it's actually the other way around. Like there's something about the power of like pussy embodiment that is actually, it's not just about like, oh, she comes first. Like, yeah, sure. But like, it's something a little bit more primal and primordial in how that unfolds and works. That's like, it's actually like the opposite of what we've all been doing, both spiritually and in an embodied sense. And it's like a hard ship to turn around, I think, for a lot of people, both as individuals and in relationships. But it's incredibly important and it like absolutely is, it resonates as truth on like all levels, not just the embodiment level. Like it's very important.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I know what you mean. It's interesting, I was born in 1984 and I have an older sister, and we had a lot of stuff videoed off the TV
Mm-hmm.
as you did in the 90s. And we had a recording of Madonna's Blonde Ambition tour.
Madonna's such an oracle. That's all I have to say.
Right. And I saw that when I was like 5 or 6.
Mm.
And I mean, I know it. I found it on YouTube recently. I was like, yeah, I remember this bit. I remember the costume changes. Like, random bit of trivia. Robert Anton Wilson is like one of the good dudes from the acid generation. He's a brilliant, brilliant writer and was a peer of Tim Leary,
Mm,
but profoundly different in his ways, put it that
hmm.
way. Wrote a bunch of great books, including the Cosmic Trigger series, which I love. And I listened to an interview with him once. He passed, obviously. And he said that he was amused by the idea that Aleister Crowley had reincarnated as Madonna. And I've never been able to forget it. Aleister Crowley hated the Catholic Church and swore he would come back as a woman. And I'm just saying there are some major provocation codes going on and also, incredible displays of look at me, like give me all your attention energy that I have been unable to forget that.
You can't unsee it.
I really can't.
I'm gonna have to like write a whole essay about that because that just blew up like 50 million things in my head.
Part of the reason that I raise it is because I'm very glad that I was exposed to that at a young age. There were a lot of powerful women in my family.
Mm,
I was not raised by women who were subservient or they were independent. I don't think that they had, certainly in my grandmother's case, I don't think she was prioritizing her pleasure or her desire.
hmm.
But she was powerful and she was independent and she lived on her own terms, which was a radical thing for a woman of that generation. However, I also know that what I take to be the kind of message of that Blonde Ambition tour and that era of Madonna's work, which was express yourself, literally that's like the name of the song, that can be, and perhaps for a period was like wielded like a weapon.
Mm,
And so it's not quite it. It's not in its fullness. It's it's embodied female energy in the matrix managing overbearing masculine energy or distorted masculine energy, maybe I should say. And so I'm grateful that it occurred and that I was exposed to it. I think it was empowering. And I also think it's not perfect and nothing is, but we're moving into a time where there can be a fullness that is truly generative. That's my
yeah.
hope.
It's like the way that, for the millennials, it's like the girl boss or like making it in corporate. It's like, yeah, but we're still under the patriarchal assumption that like corporate is what we need.
Right.
And then, I was just reading an article this morning where they're just, oh my gosh, we're just so upset that all of these women are leaving the workforce with young children. I'm like, the workforce is not designed for women with children. Like, what are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
So there's a way that like, it's like we're still judging success and the expression of express yourself with the patriarchal assumption, which is still not quite it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's no mystery that it's very difficult for you to easily put into words what you do. So we've got to the bottom of that. That's why it's tricky for you sometimes to effectively communicate everything that you have to offer. But I will just take this opportunity to strongly advocate that anyone who is considering engaging in one of Grace's offerings should try it out. I don't mean that to sound, I'm saying it in a playful way because it's fun to do advertisements for your friends, but I mean it sincerely, and hopefully this conversation, which I really enjoyed, gets to some of the kind of tactile, energetic experience that is available, but incredibly difficult to summarize in a paragraph and put on a website.
Do you want to share before we wrap up a little bit more about where people can find you and get obsessed with you online and learn more about your work?
Sure, sure. I have a website. The business that I run is called New Woo, NEWWOO, and It's called that because it's so common for someone to say, oh, it's woo-woo in a dismissive way. The other version of it is when people call things pseudoscience.
Oh yeah, that's one
Yeah,
of my favorites. I'm like,
that's
you
one of my
mean
favorite.
you just don't understand it?
Yeah, and like you look up someone who sounds kind of interesting and they wrote some weird books or they did some weird experiments and you read their Wikipedia article and someone's like, this is pseudoscience. Someone has taken the time to make sure. And yeah, there's a lot of things that we can't explain. And there's a lot of things that are very potent and cannot be measured. And that is a space I love to hang out in. And that is the quality of the flower essences. So I offer coaching and flower essences. You can have just a flower essence blend, or you can have some coaching as well. You could have one and then the other. And it's beautiful work. I would say, if I were to summarize it, that flower essences are a frequency. In the UK, they're categorized as a vibrational drink, and its frequencies in a bottle. It's yin energy, so it's a small and slow and steady kind of transformation, and they're excellent for any emotional recalibration. I focus my marketing and my presence online towards people who are working in the creative industries or people who have been damaged by the creative industries, because that's my greatest point of reference. I've worked in film for north of 15 years and my life partner works in music. So, and between us and our social group, we've got a lot of bases covered. However, I would also say flower essences are essentially not so. Flower essences are highly effective for any emotional recalibration, and you don't have to be in the creative businesses for us to work together. And most of my creative work, most of my film work is currently offline because it's kind of being reshuffled and reorganized, as is always the case. But that's it for now, basically.
Love that. And I'll attest to the potency and efficacy of your blends. I can't tell you what a gift it is, where you're just like, can I just douse for you? I'm like, yep, please just talk to whoever it is that you talk to and ask what flowers need to be in it, and I'll take it. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a few moments to subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and share the episode. These small tasks help our independent podcast so much. Be sure to also check out the show notes below to learn more about any resources, guests, or sponsors that we shared with you today. Our intro and outro music was created by artists Aaron Palovic and Jared Kelly. Our podcast logo was created by Elaine Stevenson, and this show is produced by Softer Sound Studio. Thank you for being here. Be well. Peace.